morning, everyone. Really good to see the turnout. It's when you start this, put it together, you have no idea how many people are going to be here. There's about 135 people here, and we range right from BC to Quebec. Does that work? That's better. Can you hear me without?
It's being recorded, Greg, so.
Yeah, I better hold it.
Oh boy.
Just hold on to it.
Okay. So for the introduction, I'm just going to go through kind of the history of High Brix Manufacturing and back to your roots, where we came from, why we're here, what we're looking to achieve, the history of it, and our thought process. So my background in this, I came from the construction world, and in '99 I invested in the lab in Vulcan, the soil food web lab with Elaine Ingham. And long story short, it was not successful. We failed miserably. There were some management issues, but we bled money and we couldn't make it work working with the guru still is in the biological world. So instead of just quitting, I decided that I wanted to understand why we failed so miserably on the biological side of it, working with the guru. So I went to different conferences, started with Acres and other different shows that were quite unique, not in the not your normal agricultural. And in the process, I got introduced to the GSR calcium, and we had a meeting with one of Glenn's representatives at the time, and he came out and he told us about what the calcium could do, and talking about grams per acre, and that really didn't resonate with anything. I grew up on a farm. I don't farm. Better. And that's good. Okay. Look at that. So I would still, for some reason, agriculture resonated with me. And so after we met Glenn, talking about the calcium, seen that there was something really interesting about it, but to get an understanding of how grams per acre of anything would work, that didn't resonate with me. So I talked to Glenn's people at the time, and they said Steve Weston, who formulated the calcium, was going to be in California for a week, and if I had time to go down and spend a week with him. So that's what I did, and that was in '04-ish. And we got there. I'd never met Steve. He was about 5'9", burly, stocky type of guy, and gentle, mild-mannered. And we, first field we went out to, I'll never forget it. The farmer he'd invited about 40 people to his farm, and 4 guys showed up. But he had a shovel, and he was digging, and he had about 4 inches of aerobic soil, and he was ecstatic about his soil. It had taken him a couple of years to get there, and he was just ecstatic. And then he was so disappointed that he didn't have 40 people looking at his soil. I'll never forget that day. He was mad and happy, and it switched about every 15 seconds. It was quite an experience. But in the long run, that was the first time that I'd ever met a farmer that was excited about soil. And that resonates. So we spent the week going to different field crops all through different parts of California, and it was the same thing. People that had the better structure soil were doing better. And Steve and I he was just gentle. He was just a really good guy to be around, and just knowledge of so many things. Later, so Steve came up, here the year after, and I got to spend some time with him. And that's when I got to know his history. Why was he so passionate about soil? So when he was 16, him and his dad didn't get along. He said he left because that somebody was going to get hurt. They were physically fighting. So he left. He wanted to go to university. And the only way that he felt that he could do that, he joined the military, and he ended up in Vietnam. He said 2 weeks later, after he signed up, he was in Vietnam. And he worked he was on the front lines of support. He spent a year in Vietnam. When he came back, they classified him as a vet then, and he could go to any university with a free ride. So he went to San Diego State University, got his geological engineering, got hired by Dresser. Age 29, he was an executive. He had the corner off it. He had access to the private jets. He had unlimited credit cards. He could go do whatever he wanted, however he wanted. That's the American dream. The one issue was when he was in Vietnam, he got exposed to all the toxins and chemicals there. So what happened with the vets that were exposed to this, they came back with a 5 to 15-year death sentence. So at 29, he was almost 30, he knew this was happening. His teeth were rotting out, he was shrinking, he had joint pain, and that was normal. So he went to the hospital, and they did the analysis on him and said, yeah, you got probably 3 years to live. We know where you're at on this. Nothing we can do for you in a year, so we can maybe fuse your spine. You'll start with a cane, a walker, a wheelchair. It's going to be painful. Good luck. And he said, okay, that's not a good enough resolve of my life. I don't want to go there. So he knew about Kerry Reams, of course. The other veterans that had went through the same thing had went to him. So he went to a Kerry Reams course, and Reams had his human equation. So he tested Steve and said, yeah, you are in terrible, terrible shape. Your life expectancy, yes, isn't very long with the balance that you have right now. So Steve said, okay, I don't like that. What can I do? And Reams told him, this is a 4-hour truck ride that we were going from Regina towards Calgary. So it was just him and I for 4 hours talking about his history. And Reams says, the body can heal itself. He says, we have done it. Because Reams, he worked on the soil side, he worked on the plant, he worked on the animal and human. And he treated tens of thousands of people just with saliva and urine. And again, individual medicine is what he practiced. So when Steve went to him and he said, yep, you can rebuild yourself, Steve says, okay, minerals, supplements, how do you do this? And he said, you have to start with good soil. You cannot heal yourself unless you have top quality food. And you only get top quality food from very high functioning soil. So the long story short with Steve, he passed away 5 years ago at 73 years of age. He didn't live a poor life. Like I said, when I met him, he was 58. He was burly, he was stocky, he was up and down stairs, he was physically active. In fact, he was going to the gym 3 times a week. So in my background, I went looking prior to that how grams could work and how we could get soil to work, because for some reason it resonated, and I ran into Steve. And after his life story, to understanding what he'd been through, what he had come through, that it was, I was in construction before, and I go, okay, 35, 40 years old and needed a career change. So that's how I got exposed to the soil health and rolled in. It's all because of Steve Weston. So from there, then it was, what does healthy soil look like? And then got introduced to Glenn after that at some of his seminars. And it kept resonating more and more that there's really something here, and to have a purpose, a real purpose to help other people to get soil function. So that's how High Brix Manufacturing started. And Cindy, at the same time, with Back to Your Roots, she was a psych nurse. And she was really interested in where I was going and what I was doing, and she came to some of the functions. And she just kept on asking more questions. I want to get more involved in this. I want to get more involved in this. Well, you're a psych nurse. You got 8 years to retirement, full pension, done. Like, you can go. Can you wait 8 years? Nope, I can't. She quit. And she started Back to Your Roots. So that's the history of how we both started. And then from there, it just kept on building of what healthy soil looks like. Started interacting with more and more farmers, more people going to, tying into more people that understood what soil health was, what plant health was, animal health, and human health. And the real sad part about this is they aren't the people that you see on TV that are promoted. They're the people that you have to go looking for to understand because they're not discussed. So that fits in with the speakers that we have for this conference. They're very, very knowledgeable, but they're not your mainstream speakers. But I feel that these people carry more knowledge and more information that's essential for farmers, producers, growers to move ahead to make things more efficient. One of the things Steve always talked about, he says, further we get down the line and our soil gets sicker and doesn't function as well, he goes, the salt-based fertilizers aren't going to work as well. The weeds are become more well-established, and with that, your herbicides aren't going to work as well. And this last year, you know, when he said that, you go, oh boy, he's been right about a lot of things. Okay, but this last year, and in Alberta and South, the kochia. The kochia, it was dry, and the kochia took off. The crops, if you drove, it's not up here yet, but it's moving, and you go down south, that fields were completely kochia. And I've talked to quite a few guys about it. Most of the guys sprayed at least twice, quite a few sprayed up to 4 with all kinds of different tank mixes to get a kill, and it didn't do anything. So we also have wild oat resistance to the herbicide. But now with this kochia, we have tens of thousands of acres going into this year now that have kochia residue. It's going to be, one of the big fears is, how am I going to seed into that? How am I going to not plug up equipment? How am I going to get proper seed depth with all this kochia and the issues that's going to cause for us? So almost like Steve was right again with the things that he talked about. So in the conversation today with the speakers, and I want to add one other thing with this kochia. So there's an organic farmer down by Foremost, and that's kind of kochia central. I talked to him this fall, and he goes, yeah, we had about 1.5 inches of rain this year, crops weren't good, and whatever. And so, how's your kochia? And he goes, I got one patch. He said, I've had it for 15, 20 years. He goes, I got one patch, but it's getting smaller every year. What about your neighbors? He says, oh, I can drive around all of my fields, he says, in the fence line, and I look across and they're completely polluted with kochia. So again, it's environment, where we're going, what we're doing. I'm just setting seeds for the speakers later for the thought process to open your mind to where we're going in this whole. If you really start looking at what's happening with our soils, with our production, there's quite a few symptoms and signs that we're getting to some issues, some very large issues. I'll leave it with that. I want to talk a little bit about the speakers and why the speakers that we have today. The first one to talk about is Tom Dykstra. Tom is very unique with his education, his background, his thought process. He did his PhD under Phil Callahan, so he is very familiar with energies. He's an entomologist. He has done research on insects and how insects communicate. And the really interesting thing about it, his science, entomology, when he shows his research and what he's doing that, the present day thought might not quite be right, instead of them saying, well, that's quite interesting, they shunned him. It's kind of the where we live in, so Tom brings a really unique perspective. He's worked with John Kemp's organization for the last 4 or 5 years as research for them. He has lots of background and comes from a completely different mindset. One of the next speaker, or not in the order, Ed Kelly. He works with radionics in the scalar energy world. He's put on a course the last 2 days. It's a really interesting tool. It's kind of like a lie detector. So he'll explain that. And he is the only one in North America that produces the machines, teaches the machines the whole. So he's another really, really unique speaker. One of the next speakers, Robert Faust. Dr. Faust, I have followed him on YouTube for 10 to 12 years. Again, kind of obscure. He talks about humics, fulvics, calcium, silica, and it wasn't until I talked to him a couple times on the phone, and then last year I went and met him. And when you sit down at the table and he starts talking, it's, oh boy. He is academia now, everything is focused. If you have something, you focus down to the bottom, that you learn everything about that. And then the question is, okay, beautiful, good research, how does this affect the real world? And the answer very often is, we have no idea, we need more money to study that. Whereas Dr. Faust, in his thought process, in talking to him, everything is tied in. Anything that he's researched, he steps back and looks. He's studied ancient civilizations. He's just very, very well-rounded. So when you listen to him, he's the thinkers that he reminds me to from about 1880 to 1960. You had big, broad thinkers, and I feel Dr. Faust fits into that area. So this is the first time we've had him at a conference. I've just talked to him in person, and I'm really excited to listen to him. For dinner last night, and he's good. I will leave Glenn till the end. The other portion of our conference is that we got four producers. So the speakers are the big ideas. Then we have 4 producers that will present on what's happening on their farm and what they're doing. So that's the implementation of the big ideas. We got 2 organic farmers, Andrew Mans and Brian Luce, and then 2 conventional farmers. Yeah, we got Justin Ninga and Brian Zwack. And they've each went through the soil function. All 4 of these, even though they're 2 from organic and 2 from conventional, have went through the same processes, the same experiences to get. So, you know, it's before the conventional world always looked at the organic guys like, oh my goodness, if I have a neighbor, I'm just going to get weeds. This is going to be bad. We need to eradicate him and get him out. Whereas the more that I work with organic farmers, the more I learn from them because of their toolbox is so small. And if you have an organic farmer that you can drive by a field or walk through a field and it looks very, very similar to a conventional field with that small toolbox, that's a guy you should probably talk to get ideas from. So again, so we have the 4 producer panels that I'm looking forward to. I haven't seen the slide decks, but I know the guys in there and they're really good. Another thing that in agriculture that's happening is this biological world that's coming, and they've been out for 10, 15 years. I just talked to a friend of mine in New Zealand, and he's working with a South African company who have eliminated all their salt-based fertilizers. The only thing that they're still using from conventional is spot spraying with herbicide. And the rest, they're using autotrophs and a technology. They're testing with their nitrogen. They're using azobacter, and with their technology, they're producing about 80 pounds of nitrogen per month per acre. They have other biology that's solubilizing your phosphate and your potassium and your trace minerals. And then there's three other sects of the autotrophs that control and convert carbon. And they've been doing this for 3 years. So I'm just throwing this out here that, you know, there's change coming, whether or not it's going to be good or bad, but that's a big step that we went from before, you know, kind of twigging a little bit with the biological to going completely to the synthetics. And last, our opening speaker, Glenn Rabenberg. Why would you have him as a speaker and as your first speaker? Glenn worked with Steve Weston. That was his mentor. That's who designed the calcium. Glenn put it together. So Glenn, in spending time with Steve, you know that his analytical abilities are really, really good, because anytime you went with Steve, the first thing he said, if you went on a field walk, he says, clear your mind. We don't know nothing. We are just here to collect data. Get rid of your preconceived notions. We're just going to collect data. We will have time afterwards to analyze the data. And that's the training and the knowledge that Glenn got from Steve. And he spent many, many years with him. And Glenn, because of his calcium, he travels. He works with small horticulture. He works with small acres. He works with broader acres. He works with pretty much every type of crop that you can imagine. There's people in California that he works on that you and I would never get to. He signs an NDA so that they will allow him, or so that he can get on their property to discuss their issues. Kind of ironic. So he does lots of traveling, really, really good analytical and thinking ability, and so he pays attention, and great speaker and a good friend.